Hi, this is Dave from Split. I recently had a chat with Mel DeSoiza and Nathan Wickman from TVNZ's On Demand about what it's like to move from a manual experimentation practice to using Split's experimentation platform. Mel and Nathan work on the streaming video app for TV New Zealand's 2 million daily viewers. Let's hear what they had to say.
Historically, we've always done experimentation with TVNZ On Demand, but the way that we did it was quite sort of manual. The primary reason that we were looking at a platform was wanting to really speed up our ability to experiment, take out a lot of the manual work associated with it, and let us kind of really scale from doing one experiment every month or every few weeks to get to the point where we could be running experiments all the time and running multiple experiments and just trying to speed up that whole cycle of being able to test new things and then get that feedback quickly. Everyone's just been so impressed with Split since we brought it in, just how quickly we've been able to now do our experimentation, get our results. There's been a lot of excitement around using it to kind of test our new features. So it's been, I think, the people that kind of work directly with the product, everyone's really on board with it, and it's been seen as a great success.
I think we've just accelerated the product and we've added a whole bunch of cool stuff that we're really proud of. And we were just talking about it before, like we've just done so much with the product that I think a year ago was a lot harder to do. We're stoked, yeah.
And we've been able to measure the impacts and show that, the ideas that we've worked on have actually produced tangible business results. So that's, it's been, really useful for us. There were quite a few things that were in the platform that had lived there for years that people would kind of question the value of. They had been introduced, new features introduced years ago. And there was always a fear of removing these things. And so having an experimentation platform allowed us to actually revisit those things and get people around the business who may have been invested in those ideas or part of those ideas, get them on board with the idea of actually, we're not sure about this, but what we can do is we can take it up and we can test it. And if it does have the impact that we think it is, then we'll pick that up. I think internally we have had great buy-in in experimentation. It hasn't been something that we've had to convince people on. I think we just have had to go through the sort of organizational hoops around budgeting and securing funding, but all the key people that kind of work on the product itself have all been, really on board with being able to do it. We've gone from running one, experiment maybe every month or every couple of months to being able to, at points, we just actually had too many experiments to run, because we were just moving so quickly now. That became a bigger problem, was okay, how do we actually sequence and manage all of these experiments that we've got going on? So we've been able to move a lot quicker. And then if you look post-experiment, that's normally when we were doing the analysis previously. So you would run your experiment for 2 weeks and then, your analyst would then spend between a few days and a few weeks, depending on how much work they've got on their plate, to actually analyze the results and come back with some insights, right? Whereas with Split now, it's that straight away. So you can make the call once your experiment window is done. You can be like, let's roll this out or let's roll this back. So you can move a lot faster. You often have your sort of core business metrics, but they may not necessarily be the best metrics to use for your experimentation because they may not be overly sensitive to individual product changes. So for us, that really the key metric is reach, but it's a weekly metric, and so to actually shift that is quite difficult, and you potentially have to run experiments for long periods of time to actually detect any shift in that. So as Mel said before, we tend to focus on more granular metrics and looking at just how much content are people engaging when they come in, and that gives us a good steer on whether new features are pushing the product in the right direction. An important part with A/B testing is obviously capturing your hypotheses, the thing that you're actually getting down to what you're really trying to test. And I think in some cases you'll look at those and go, we're really confident in this. We think there's very little risk that we could be wrong here. This is just clearly the right thing to do. And in that situation, we wouldn't do an A/B test, because it's really just adding unnecessary overhead. But I would say, in the majority of cases, we would look at our ideas as hypotheses and go, actually, we think this is a good idea, but we don't know for sure. So let's design a test around it and run it as an A/B test.
At the moment, we've been trying to do a lot of personalization. So depending on kind of what type of viewer you are, you might get a different homepage. And so in the past, the way that it was done was that, our research and insights department would try to figure out what type of user you are and try and equally allocate those groups of people into these two different homepages, just based on, numbers of people at a certain point in time. But obviously what we found was throughout the experiment that could change. And so Split enables us to do that by, only looking at people that come to the site, not just a group of people that are, in this group at a static point in time. And so it really helped us push that experiment through and get, more rigorous with our statistics on that. So that was really useful. And every time we wanted to, change the variation or increase the sample size, we could just do that straight away. And people were really impressed with that, being able to do that in Split.
We've had a couple of experiments where we were really confident that something would give us a good result, and we actually saw that it gave a negative result. And so that's where I think, you have those sorts of experiences and you go, actually, hold on, you can't really be 100% on anything. And that's where I say I think we do have a bias towards experimentation. But just as an example, so I mean, we run it's a on-demand streaming platform. So we've got TV shows and movies, and we look to introduce a piece of metadata around how many seasons and episodes do we have available for a particular show, which is a very common piece of metadata. If you use Netflix, use any streaming platform, that's available. And we put together a design, and we were mostly interested in learning what kind of impact we would get, not would we get an impact. Yeah. And it was interesting because the test actually showed that introducing that metadata actually reduced some of our kind of key engagement metrics by a small but significant amount. And so that was a great learning for us, because it prevented us from introducing something that we thought was good, but actually would have likely given us a kind of a negative impact. And so we took that away, and that allowed us to think about it. And we knew that we wanted to tell people, we wanted to give people this information. It's really useful. But the fact that we got a negative result made us rethink the design treatment. Had we given it too much kind of weighting in terms of the design and the placement in the user interface. And so we're now doing another cycle on that to kind of rethink that and we make it available, but perhaps give it a little less prominence on the, within the service.
In terms of just starting off as a new experimentation company, I think one of the main things to do is make sure you've involved everyone from the business. Like when you have that collaboration and you've brought everyone along the journey, I think they're more keen and they have more buy-in.
Before we brought in Split, the first step you'd have to do is you'd have to basically get a list of users that you were going to test something with, right? Which was, you had to go to an analyst, as Mel mentioned before that, have to try to create sort of static lists that sort of look very similar to each other, that we could then say, okay, this group's going to get control, this group's going to get variation. Now, there's a bunch of pitfalls of taking that approach, which I won't get into, but the main thing for us is that was slow, right? You've got to wait to get everything together before you can even start even know who you're going to target your experiment to. And then there's a bunch of manual work to then go set that up in our feature toggling system, make sure the different groups are going to get the different features. Whereas with Split, that's all just essentially taken care of now. It'll automatically assign people as they come into the service and actually hit the service, or automatically put them into your control and your test. So that part became much simpler to just kind of integrate and get a test up and running, and in a way that, you want it to work, where people are getting equally allocated across the different groups. and it's happening in a purely random sort of fashion. So we've made that quicker, and we've also improved the quality of the approach in general, I would say. And then you run the experiment. Previously, it was we wouldn't know while the experiment was running unless our analyst was pulling numbers and sending numbers out every single day, which often they just don't have the capacity to do. We wouldn't know how that experiment is kind of tracking, whereas now we can just log into Split. The metrics are recalculated, every hour to every day, depending on how long the experiment's been running. We can always get that information out at any time. And then if you look like post-experiment, that's normally when we were doing the analysis previously. So you would run your experiment for 2 weeks, and then, your analyst would then spend between a few days and a few weeks, depending on how much work they've got on their plate, to actually analyze the results and come back with some insights, right? Whereas with Split now, it's that straight away. So you can make the call once your experiment window is done. You can be like, let's roll this out, or let's roll this back. So you can move a lot faster.
So we have destinations set up in Segment, so they get events from each of our different endpoints. I think we have about 13 different endpoints, and then those get sent through to Split. And then we also use Segment for the get treatment calls going out of Split, in case we want to do any kind of post-processing. So like Nathan was saying, in the past, our kind of data analyst would take another couple of weeks to gather that information. Sometimes they'd build a dashboard actually, out of scratch for the business to look at, whereas now they can just go into GA, pull the same data, and do that post-processing, almost immediately. So yeah, it's been really good. It was super easy. I set it up pretty quickly. It was pretty straightforward. I literally didn't have any questions. The documentation was pretty clear.
Yeah. As a product manager, I'm used to engineers saying, "Oh, look, this will only be a few days' work," and I sort of always take it with a grain of salt. But in this case, it really was. Like, I think within a week we had kind of had the integration up and running. So it was great to see the kind of the promise actually of smooth integration actually kind of happen in reality. It was awesome.